Welcome to Start by Listening, the podcast about sexual harm and trauma.
We are centered on educating and empowering our Western Kentucky communities.
Our goal is to transform the way we talk about sexual harm and trauma.
Transformation begins by listening to understand.
We talk so you can listen today and change the world tomorrow. We want to welcome everybody again to Start by Listening. And this evening, we are joined by some pretty amazing people that they've been called to a beautiful ministry in their faith, a jail ministry. And so this evening, we're going to be talking with, as you can see, several people, and we're going to hear their perspectives on the ministry that they do. And also just a little bit about the types of trauma that they have witnessed within their faith-based ministry. And we have no idea where this conversation is going to go, but I have no doubt it's going to be beautiful and it's going to be amazing. And so without further ado, who would like to introduce themselves first?
I'll go first. I don't care.
Go, Francis, go.
Jail ministry is my thing. So I started jail ministry very reluctantly in 2009. And a friend of mine through church suggested that I do what he called a service, just a community service for some of the women at the jail. So there were about 3 other women that went with me, and I went very begrudgingly. And and when I got there, it was hard to get me out of there. So I've been going with the interruption of COVID. I've been going every 2 Saturdays a month since 2009. And we still do that. We just started back. We started back for a little bit, then we got interrupted again and started back again. So we started back again last week. So it's the most, I don't know. I just can't explain the feeling that I get when I walk in there with those women.
Mm. Lovely. Wow.
Anything else you want me to say?
Oh, and that's beautiful. No, that's a long time that you've been doing this. Wow.
Well, consistency is key for them. They don't have a lot of consistency in their lives. And so they know that when they see me, they know I'm coming back. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important for them to have somebody that they know that's going to be there, when they say they're going to be there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Wow. That's beautiful.
I guess I can go ahead and follow Francis, and then we've got the other 2 that can be the official ones as how they got started in all this. But my name is Carol Adkins, and I think that I got started actually in jail ministry when Francis, I said, I don't go to your church, but I'd like to go and participate in the weekend church services and whatnot. And so I think that's probably how I got started in that. And then also there's a walk to Emmaus or a Great Banquet or Curcio, those types of weekend retreats. And I had been a part of that. And then our jail had what we call a Residents Encounter Christ weekends, which was similar to that. And Francis and I were involved with doing those weekends as well. And then Chaplain Herzog, which you'll hear from in just a minute, we are volunteers under him through the Good News Jail, and get the newsletters. And there was something in one of the newsletters that talked about trauma healing. And I had been, involved with women in recovery and had gone to some drug alliance things and community gatherings. And they just kept talking about trauma being a basis for leading people into that addiction, to cover up their pain and to escape and, those kinds of things. And I remember thinking after that, they kept talking about trauma. And I said, who's treating trauma? And so when I read about trauma healing, I immediately went to Pastor Herzog and said, hey, is this something that we can look at? So, and then Francis and I got trained in 2017 and then went to the second course in 2018.
Wonderful.
Do you want to speak next?
Well, my name's Emil Herzog, and I've had the privilege of being a chaplain, Good News chaplain at the Daviess County Detention Center for 18 years now. And I've always been convinced since I've been saved that humbly I've got the answer, and the answer is God. And so I enjoyed going to jails and prisons wherever we happened to live. And we lived in a number of places before we settled here in Owensboro, and actually felt called to the position here. God uses scripture, Hebrews 13:3, that says, remember the prisoners as though in prison with them. So excited to have an open door at our jail, and Carol and Francis coming in. And as far as trauma goes, trauma's everywhere. And in jail, everything is just intense. So it seems like trauma is even more intense, maybe number-wise, perhaps. So very, very interested in Good News and American Bible Society making this program available.
Mm-hmm.
Lovely.
I'm Joy Herzog, Emil's wife, and as being chaplains, a spouse of a chaplain, I'm privileged to go to a lot of their conferences and things available. And when we learn of these new things available, as I've been involved in ministry, we were pastors. So I'm always looking for ways that are be a blessing to other women. And when we heard it, we had the invitation by American Bible Society, and Chaplain Joe Collins could attest to this, and he knows it much better than I do. But that was an impactful conference. And we wanted, when we attended it and we learned of it, then there was the publication after that Carol saw. We were convinced that it was something very valuable, that it needed to be here. He was so happy. We were glad to get it, and that some of our volunteers were interested in it. And now I am in the process of becoming a facilitator for trauma healing groups. And I've done one healing group with these two wonderful ladies, and I look forward to being able to be a help and a blessing to other women that are finding healing, and burdens are being lifted off of their spirits and their lives that they've carried for years. And I just love it, and I look forward to it. And I'm anxious to hear what the ladies have to say, actually, myself.
Joe, before you introduce yourself, would you mind if I ask, what is good news? Carol and you both mentioned good news minute or whatever. For our listeners and for myself personally, what is that? What does that mean?
Good News Jail and Prison Ministry is the full title of it.
Okay.
We are a missions sending organization that places Christian chaplains in jails and prisons. Been doing that since 1961. Currently have chaplains in about 75 jails here in 23 states, and another 300 chaplains roughly in 25 countries around the world. And we simply go as a pastor of a church. We are the pastor of the jail or the prison we serve, go by invitation of the administration to coordinate the ministries for them.
Okay, fascinating. Thank you. I appreciate you clarifying that for me.
Yes, thank you. And I'll just go ahead. I have been a chaplain with Good News Jail and Prison Ministry now. I'm in my 26th year. Started, I was pastoring a church, and as I would stand on the steps on Sunday morning, greeting our people as they left, I would see the little county jail over on the next hill and encourage our people to go minister there until one day I got a call and said, "Hey, we need a chaplain. Do you know anybody that would be interested?" And 6 months later, I walked in the door as a chaplain, and been doing that ever since. Have done it in Tennessee and Mississippi, and now back in my home state of Virginia. Became involved with the trauma healing part of this in 2018 when Joy and Emil and others heard about it and have been making that a part of the ministry plan that we do each year. We incorporated that into our ministry and have found it to be a very useful tool.
You know, when I've never met any of the people on this Zoom call ever in person. And how this all came to be is as Shelby and I were kind of figuring out this season for season 3 of our podcast, and we looked at each month as looking at a very specific area within our community, right? And we've spoken with Reverend Rondalyn Randolph already. She was our first. And then Father Mike Clark, he's a priest over at Blessed Mother. We spoke with him. And then I was really just could not get a third person. And so I turned to social media, and I put on Facebook, I said, I need some help. Anybody know a pastor or somebody who's willing to talk about faith and trauma in the faith? And a person I used to work with at the hospital, Jamae, she said, and tagged Joy in my post. And a couple other people I like instant message that were named. But I will tell you, I was immediately just enthralled with trauma healing. And I was like, oh, trauma healing? Bible? What? And of course, I went and, I looked at the website, and the first thing I looked at was the disaster, how to survive a disaster. And, here in Kentucky, boy, we've had our share, especially most recently in Eastern Kentucky with the flooding. And then at Christmas time, in Bowling Green, the tornadoes that ripped through. And I said, okay, disaster, let me just go check this out. And I cannot tell you, I ran to Shelby's office the next day, and I was like, Shelby, it is trauma informed. Like literally, it is the kind of stuff that we here at New Beginnings teach our clients on. How do you cope with trauma? How do you begin to understand feelings, sensations that show up in our body, constriction and tightness, right? That come with grief in our chest area. I was blown away. And then Carol was so kind. She brought over one of the workbooks to me and dropped it off. And I haven't been able to look through all of it. Yes, I've been thumbing through, and I'm like, this is really good. This is some good stuff. How many other organizations that do jail ministry have the opportunity to go through this amazing program, Joe, and everybody else? Because, religion, spirituality can be a trauma for some people, and especially in jail. And of course, we think trauma informed needs to be across the board, but help us out. Is this something that every jail ministry is required to do, or is this just people who know?
This is an optional thing. We just picked it up in really 2017, we discovered it. Mm-hmm. This particular model for helping people heal heart wounds has been around since around 2000 is when it was developed. And it was actually developed for pastors in Africa who were, their parishioners were suffering through genocide, civil war, disease, and all. And they said, we need some help. We don't know what to do. And so it came out of that and was used widely in Africa and has spread to the United States. And we were fortunate. We connected with the American Bible Society at a time when they were saying, how can we best use this in the U.S.? And so we connected with them to do it in jails and prisons. where we serve as chaplains. About 2/3 to 3/4 of our chaplains are currently using it as part of their program. But the neat thing from that is it's growing beyond that. Joy Stevens was the chaplain who brought trauma healing to us. She has now moved on and is part of what we call the expansion project, which is she is carrying it to a lot of other prisons. And it's really neat. She's working in Idaho, Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, California, some other state prison systems. And I went with her last year about this time to Louisiana, and we're actually down there. They are training inmates. And Louisiana has a program where New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary has a satellite campus in their main prison, Angola, and inmates are being trained as inmate chaplains. They come out with an accredited bachelor's degree in theology and biblical studies. And so they have made this healing the wounded heart or healing heart wounds a part of the curriculum. And so they're being trained. And even through COVID, inmates inside of the Louisiana prisons were conducting healing groups with inmates.
Wow. That's just fascinating. I mean, that's fascinating. So in 2017, that's when you all discovered this program. And as you all learned about trauma-informed care, how did that land with you all as something maybe a little different than what you all had heard about before?
For me, being there, I'm hearing it and thinking this is a great tool. I mean, I'm always looking for additional tools, because each one of these I realize has the potential of reaching a population group of inmates that another one might not. And so I saw this as an excellent tool, and it proved it to be that. I think about the parable of the sower. When I thought about this, the parable of the sower doesn't deal with the seeds of the gospel. It doesn't deal with the sower. It talks about the soil, and it's not about the quality of the soil, but the condition of the soil. People who've been scorched by life, who've been trampled down by life, are resistant to the gospel, or resistant to the things of God. And so this is a tool that can break up that fallow ground, that can prepare that heart, heal those wounds, and prepare them to hear a word from God. And so I thought this is great stuff.
Can I say something? One of the things that I think is really neat about this program is, and when Joe was talking about, inmates being the ones that do that, you don't have to be any kind of pastoral staff. You don't even have to, Francis and I don't have theology degrees or anything. But to be a facilitator, you need to be a Christian. But to be a participant in a trauma healing group, you don't have to be a Christian. And so, I thought that was a very interesting thing. And, we really don't teach this. We use the scriptures, and the people read, people in the groups will read scripture, and each individual just kind of applies it to themselves. And if they don't agree with it, that's fine. So it's not, it's a way, to introduce people to, scripture. I think one of the first lesson is, if they're suffering, what is that first one? If God loves us, why do we suffer? And, that's a question that a lot of people ask. And so, just the different scriptures and the activities and things like that speak to that. But even if that's not where the person's coming from, some of the activities that you do, like artwork, or learning how to do a breathing technique to relax, those kinds of things. And we don't really teach; we really more facilitate. And so there's a lot of small group activity, and the women just share with each other. And a lot of times just having somebody that you trust listen to your story extend comfort or something like that, and giving people a safe place to, share, is I think one of the big powers of how the dynamics of these groups work.
And one of the things that I like about it is the very first meeting, the women that are in the group determine their own set of rules. In prison and jail, you're not given much of a choice in anything. But in that room, they can say, we don't want this to go anywhere. We want to be respectful. We don't want to interrupt. And, it's important for them to set the pace and set the rules. That way they really feel engaged in it. And like you said, we don't have to slam them over the head with scripture, God's word just touches hearts. And when it touches hearts, you can tell it. Some are resistant and some are just wide open. And I think a lot of times they're resistant because of the trauma that they've experienced.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful sentiments that you both shared. And I think, Shelby, didn't you had a question that was really interesting that we were talking yesterday as we were preparing.
Well, honestly, you already kind of touched on it. I mean, Carol, especially bringing up the fact that it isn't solely about 100% let's talk about the scripture. It's really focused on that trauma-informed care. And I love that you said you let them make up the rules. That self-determination is such an important part in facilitating building resiliency. But yeah, my main question that we were talking about yesterday was how much resistance do you get from people a part of the programs who come from that not necessarily religious background? Or, I mean, you look at a lot of addiction places, and I know specifically here in Owensboro, most of our recovery centers are fully religious organizations. And I know that's what this is rooted in, but the question was, how open are you to facilitating conversations with people who need that trauma-informed care in their lives to help build resiliency and process?
Well, I think that, a lot of the women that come to the Saturday church, some of them have different thoughts about Christianity. And when they do that, it's hard for them to actually, they just have questions that, sometimes you're not equipped to answer, but they expect us to be the Christians, and that we have all the answers and that we don't have trauma, we don't have troubles. You're a Christian woman, and I share prayer requests with them because I'm no different than they are. They got caught. I didn't. And that's basically, just to be there. And like Carol said, listen to them, talk to them, and God uses the right words. I can't explain that part, but when you are engaged in a conversation with someone who is truly seeking or questioning, God gives the words and then he plants the seeds. So we just kind of go back and water them.
Yeah.
So the program, you said it's about like different group sessions. Would you mind going into a little bit about the program in and of itself? What are some of the things you talk about? What are the steps to the entire Healing Institute?
And who's the question for, Shelley?
Go ahead.
Anyone who wants to answer.
Okay. Didn't want to walk on anyone. To follow up to your last question is, I have had a sizable, probably 20% of the people who have taken the group, and I deal mostly with men in the jail, though I think it's the same for women, but 20% of them are non-Christian. Some are even of other faith groups, Islam and other things like that, and they participate in it. It's not a program that is focused on converting anyone to a faith group, but just helping them heal the wounds of their heart. And that's what it's about. It's a Bible study, five core sessions that we take them through. 2 of them, I say, are focused on what's your role in this. In lesson 2, it talks about listening, finding a good listening person who listens well, talking about your problem, talking about your wound, getting it out there, how to learn to talk through it. And then talk about the grieving process is one of the lessons, and walks them through that, helps them understand that it's a journey. It's not an instantaneous thing, but it's a journey, and it's painful and it's hard. But if they'll walk through that grieving process, then they can begin to let those wounds heal. And so there's 2 lessons that deal with what the individual's role is in healing. And then there's 3 lessons that deal with God's role. The first one is, as I mentioned a moment ago, was about, where is God in my suffering? If there's a God, why does he let these things happen? And so it addresses that with Scripture. Then there's one about taking our pain to the cross. That's the title of the fourth of the 5 core lessons, and it deals with Scripture that says, by his stripes we are healed. Yes, Jesus came to die on the cross for our salvation, but he also came for our healing. And there's a lot of Scripture in the New Testament where people were healed from their hurts. And so we talk about how God can do that. And then the 5th of the core lessons is on forgiveness. What forgiveness is, what it's not. It's not a flippant thing. It's not forgetting. It's not pretending it didn't hurt. But it's an honest assessment of, that hurt. But you know what? I can turn it over to God. I can't do that on my own, but God can help me turn it over. And so those are the 5 core lessons that we do. And beyond that, there's a whole list of lessons. We call them supplemental lessons that deal with specific kinds of heart wounds that come from maybe someone who's had a close loved one experience suicide, rape, any kind of a physical abuse, trauma, disaster, just a variety of things like that that can be added to those lessons depending on your crowd. If you have a group the entire group has experienced a specific problem, they have a lot of classes, a lot of sessions that are tailored to that too. You asked about the types of lessons and what they may be. I've kind of hit on one of them. One of the lessons and one of the things that I do, I use an illustration on the inside of my arm. I have about a 5-inch scar here. 42 years ago, I rode a motorcycle through a barbed wire fence, landed in a brush pile in the edge of a hayfield, and pretty severe cut there. Went to the doctor. They patched it up, cleaned it up, patched it up. Went back 30 days later. They tried to reconnect some of the severed nerves and put it back together and bundle it up. But I went on for a year and was in terrible pain around that incision area. Just could not get relief. And so I guarded it carefully. I was afraid to let anyone near. It constantly hurt. But after about a year, it began to swell, began to turn red, and eventually headed up. And when I drained that, an interesting thing I found in what came out of it, there was a piece of grass seed that had been in my arm for over a year. And it had finally worked its way to the surface. It had finally come out. And once it came out, I cleaned the wound. The wound took a little time to heal, but it healed. And so pretty soon, the longer I went, the less it hurt. And so I tell people now, it's not a painful wound. It's just a scar that reminds me, don't smoke dope and ride motorcycles. It has a bad outcome. And
Yes.
that is what heart wounds are about. It's like that physical wound. Until we address them, until we clean them out and allow them to heal properly, They are going to affect everything we do. But once we deal with it, it begins to heal, and we can then begin to move on from that wound, that traumatic experience, and we can move on from that. And it can then be a reminder and a teaching tool for others.
That's a great story, Joe. Very true story. Joy, I think you wanted to say something.
Yes, there are 5 2-hour sessions, and one of the sessions is called Lamenting, which I think is a very important part. You'll read in the Psalms that David lamented. He put his emotions out there, what he was going through, and I think that's a very important part, a very important session for those where you spend the night where the participants can just lament and share the hurt and the pain that they have gone through.
The lament, actually, when we first went to our first training session, we went through the program itself as we learned. And the lament was my favorite part. It was, and what I like to tell the ladies, it's okay to holler at God. He can handle it. And, you know, a lot of them think, oh, I can't do that. I can't say that, you know. And I said, but you're thinking it. And he already knows what you think. And he knows the words before they leave our lips. So, you know, the only thing a lament is required to have is a complaint. And then at the end, you have to go back to, but I will trust him. I will trust him, even though, you know, I'm really not happy with this right now. And I don't like the way things are going right now. But he's faithful and he can be trusted. And I'll still trust him. And that's, I love that because the ladies just seem to, you know, they have a hard time because they don't have their voice a lot of times. They've been told to sit down and shut up or sit down and smacked, you know, and they just don't have that self-confidence. I've met more talented and gifted individuals in jail than I have in any other place. They're creative, they're artistic, smart, you know, and when you just separate them out from that addiction or whatever, they're some of the most beautiful people you'll ever talk to and spend time with. But their thinking sometimes is really, really messed up.
That's what trauma does to our brains.
It does.
Yeah. I mean, you know, just today I was sharing with a client that, you know, our prefrontal cortex right here, right behind our forehead, that's where our behaviors, our emotions come from. That's where impulsivity lives. Mm-hmm. And that is not fully developed until age 25. And here we're expecting 18-year-old kids to make adult decisions. Mm-hmm. And it's not possible.
And when those kids start smoking marijuana or drinking alcohol at the age of 9, 10, 11, you know, what does that do? What does that destroy? And, you know, they can't reason. They can't reason. They can't. And so then they think they're stupid. And of course, people tell them they're stupid, or a husband or live-in or whatever tells them they're stupid. Mm-hmm. And their self-confidence and their self-worth goes to zero.
Yes.
When you have a woman stand up in a Residents Encounter Christ meeting and just beg somebody to tell them that she's enough, you know, that. And this girl graduated college, you know, she had a nursing degree, and she just had been told she wasn't worth anything for so long that she just gave up. And brilliant, beautiful, Yeah. And it just breaks your heart. Sorry, I just when I get into that, I just see too many gifted and beautiful women that are not living up to their potential, and therefore not taking part in the kingdom and using the gifts God gave them.
You can really hear how passionate you are about the work you do. And it's beautiful, because it's true that trauma causes people to do things that they wouldn't necessarily do in the right state of mind.
Yeah. It's funny because when I first started feeling the call to do jail ministry, I fought it for 7 years. And the one day I gave into it was the day that changed my life forever, because now I can't imagine not doing it.
Yeah. Beautiful testament. And Joe, I just saw the message you sent in the chat. You've got a story.
Yes, this is one. It's actually in the participants guide in the book the ladies use. This came from a lady in the Midwest in a facility. Is sharing her story of how trauma, healing the heart wounds, changed her. And she said, I walked into the classroom at the correctional facility at age 56, facing her 4th time in prison, 3rd parole violation to boot. Said the scars were so deeply hidden, I could not verbally express them. Struck down by physical abuse of the body, I thought it was no cure. My life was chaotic and out of control. You feel ungodly when ungodly things happen to you. I was hurt, hopeless. It was too hard to move on. I started stuffing instead of forgiving. I ran from one pain to find another. Where is the comfort and peace I once knew in God? What is the pain that's holding me back from the blessed life I deserve to live? My emotion cannot cope with the pain. The drugs could not numb the pain. The alcohol could not drown the pain. The abscess had made a hole so deep and so ugly in my heart. How could God heal me? Physically, emotionally, spiritually exhausted. How can the wounds of the heart heal? Walking into the classroom, my God gave me the strength to talk about the trauma, the core of my pain. I talked, I cried, I grieved, I got mad. I called on God. I shared my complaints. I asked for help and trusted in his power. The soothing oil from Jesus poured over me as I nailed my pain to the cross. I have seen my own brokenness and given every shattered piece to God. Through his grace and mercy, praise, honor, and glory belong to him. God snatched me out before I fell in deep depression. He knows me better than anyone. I don't have to keep exhausting myself trying to rebuild my life after another shipwreck. He controls the storm. Through his grace and mercy, I see a new vision. I see the others, and 97% of women who suffer trauma, many not even knowing it. I now have an eye to see the others and extend a helping hand, the grace to step outside myself. So there's a testimony of one young lady or middle-aged lady whose life was transformed by the Healing the Heart Wound study. In 2018, I was part of a study, Baylor University School of Biblical Research partnered with Daviess and studied, is this truly effective or is it just a feel-good thing? And we had over 200 inmates who went through the trauma healing or healing the wounded hearts class. And they surveyed those and put the findings together. And probably one of the key things that would ring true with most of us is that in interviewing them prior to going through the Healing the Heart Wounds class, 75% of them were considered PTSD positive. 3 months post Healing Heart Wounds class, that stood at about 42%. So it had a significant impact on people's lives who had been traumatized. And so probably, and there's much more to that research. You can go to Baylor Research or ABS Trauma Healing website, either one, and find more information on that. But I wanted to share that one figure with you.
That's great. So I have a question. And Francis, what we've been talking about specifically with the women who are in jail, especially due to addiction, we know that trauma is the real gateway drug, right? Addiction. Right. Substances are just a form of coping. And from my personal perspective, I think we need a complete prison reform. The whole system needs upheld. We need to help people with addictions rather than just incarcerate them. However, my question for the Trauma Institute and your program is, when you're working with people, we're talking about the trauma that they have personally, right? Helping them process their trauma, which may have led them to addictions or shoplifting or some minor level crime that ended them up in the prison industrial system, right? What about the people who have caused trauma? Because here at New Beginnings, my title is a victim advocate. I walk with survivors through the criminal justice system to see their perpetrator incarcerated so that they can have a sense of justice for what happened to the trauma that was caused to them. Have you worked with extremely violent offenders? Not just people suffering their own trauma. I mean, trauma causes people to cause trauma for other people, but how does this system help, again, violent offenders, people who have caused devastating trauma to others? Have you worked with those types of offenders? Have you seen them go through this program? What is your
I personally have not. Most of the women that I've dealt with are just victims of the trauma, or and sometimes in certain cases they have caused trauma because it's a generational thing. They don't know any different. Mm-hmm. And so that's addressed as well in the forgiveness. Mm-hmm. They have to learn to forgive themselves for whatever they've caused, trauma they've caused, because they have that guilt that they carry, mm-hmm. based on what they've done to their children or not, where they've left their children and chased something else, and mm-hmm. their children have, gone the other way, or their children have followed them in their addiction because of the trauma that they've been through, because of the mother, what she's been through. Mm-hmm. And it's the same for the dads too, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. But as far as working with someone, that's the perpetrator, I have not experienced anything like that. Most of what I have dealt with is just going through the, like I said, the generational trauma type thing. Yeah. I'm sure it's prevalent. I would guess, Joe, that Joy Stevens has probably seen as much, if not more than that, where she's dealt with.
Yes, and again, most of my work is with the men. I have ladies who work with the female inmates in this respect. But with the men, I have probably 40% of the participants in the trauma healing groups I did. I specifically went to the units that held the violent offenders. The Louisiana project I mentioned, the people who are serving down there are lifers. Yes. Nearly every mm-hmm. one of them are lifers. And so, yes, violent offenders. The And the program is actually much more effective to people who have an increased level of trauma than those who have a lesser level of it. In regards to, dealing with the perpetrator, the lesson on forgiveness does really a good job of that, helping them release that, realizing, the pain's not going to go away, but they can release that to God. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord, I will repay. And so when we realize that and realize we don't have to get even, we don't have to take a step toward making it right ourselves, but we can just entrust it to God and get on with our life. It frees us. And then, the healing of the pain comes from realizing our value in God through Christ and how He brings healing to us. But the forgiveness and letting that perpetrator go, it's not saying they're going to escape the consequences of their action. It just says, I'm not the one that has to be responsible to make sure they suffer those consequences. And so that gives you a lot of freedom to walk away. This one of the things about the healing the wounded hearts that I have found to be really interesting is that it's only 5 2-hour sessions, as Emil mentioned earlier. And because of the clientele that I deal with and he does in a local county detention center, 30 days or less, a lot of people are there. And so we oftentimes, when we do these, I do them in 5 consecutive days. And so it's really fast. It's a lot of stuff to deal with over in 5 days. But the power of it, the effectiveness of it is just unbelievable. Because it gives them a framework. Not only do we help them deal with some healing those wounds that they see and that are exposed, but it's also saying, okay, here's a framework for dealing with future trauma. And and you can use that framework when other wounds come up that you didn't even realize you had. Here's a framework for dealing with it. God's there. He loves you. Find somebody you can trust to listen. Tell it to God. Walk through that grieving process of learning to live in that new normal after the pain. Take your pain to the cross. Let God heal you from it. Forgive and walk on. And so they're able to do that. And as well, then they're equipped to help others around them deal with their pain and find healing from that. So to be just 5 short sessions, 10 hours worth of classroom time, it's probably one of the most effective tools that I have found for helping people move beyond, because, like I said, 97% of women, 89% of men, trauma in their life has served as a pathway into the criminal justice system. And so helping them process that appropriately can break that cycle and set them free from having to medicate. Substance abuse probably ranks the highest in publicity, but it ranks the lowest in being an actual problem that leads people to jail. Most of the substance abuse is self-medication from pain.
Been sitting here and just taking it all in. I mean, gosh, a wealth of knowledge and thoughts and so many things that you all talked about also are things that, we do, like voice and choice. That's one of our biggest things that we talk about. Francis, you talked about how many times the women have never had a voice or a choice in anything, and getting to make their group rules. So powerful and empowering. Helping clients on this side to learn this, what we call this window of tolerance of emotion, right? Of being able to lean into the sadness, right? Or it's been my experience that when people come into therapy, they either do sad really well or they do anger really well.
Yeah.
And normally because it's not an embracing of both, right?
Yeah.
We have this avoidance of like, I don't want to be angry, or, I don't want to be sad, And so learning that window of tolerance to be able to lean into those uncomfortable sensations. And, just like you all talked about, of having a safe person, somebody they trust. And so many times what's happened with the survivors we work with, whether the sexual assault was in childhood or adulthood, it's having to relearn boundaries. And what are boundaries? And understanding not everyone deserves to hear your story, right? And so many times people will come to New Beginnings and the client will say, this is my last hope. No other therapist has ever been able to help me. They run from me. They tell me I'm too much, to whatever. And so I'm like, well, okay, so we'll do the best we can. And we do some things that are unconventional. Oh, I'm going to stop for a second, Joe. Oh, Carol. Oh, okay. Carol is saying, Joe, I know you have another meeting. Anything else about the history? Yes, go ahead.
I've got just a minute longer. So I'm going to listen in for just a few more minutes with you. And I have one graphic I'm trying to find to point out the path of trauma healing and how it works.
Oh, that's
I'm going to
beautiful.
do that before I leave.
Yeah, just find that. But
Is that the arc with the cross on it, Joe?
Yes, that's what I have.
Yeah. I'll just say, when we find a woman that needs someone to just kind of bounce things off of. There was a woman in one of our very first healing classes at the jail, and I came in contact with her again, maybe less than 6 months ago. And her trauma was, she had a little brother die in a fire. And she asked me if I would consider meeting with her now, because she's still going through some things. And she said that trauma healing helped me so much, but I feel like I still need, to bounce some things off. So we meet every other Monday for about an hour. And, you'll hear the stories of the women. Her release was in the artistic part. She loved that part. And she was able to draw that fire out. And, another woman, her memory was from a smell. I believe they might have been in the same class, Carol. I can't remember, but I think they were. They were the very first class I think we did. And you could physically see a change in her when she mentioned that. It was just like it went her body just went, all over her. And she said, I can remember the smell, and that triggers her. She could see him, but the mental thing was that the other senses were bothered. Mm-hmm. And so that's what there's a thing in trauma healing that, to bring you back from maybe where your mind's going to make you come back to the present. And it uses the senses. Tell me, what things can I see? What things can I feel? What things can I hear? What things can I touch? So that brings them back into the present, and they get a lot of ideas and things to cope with these. The deep breathing, they visual. It's just an awesome way that you don't think about if you're not involved with it,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
We call that grounding techniques. That's one of the first things that you learn as a crisis counselor. And that's one of the things that we do with callers when they call in crisis, panicking, triggered from something.
Yeah.
It's are you comfortable? Are you safe to take a deep breath? Let's figure out so you are safe in this moment.
Yeah.
He cannot hurt you right now. They cannot hurt you right now.
Yeah.
She cannot hurt you right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I didn't, I would have never thought anything about that before. But when we went through the class, it was just, I don't care who you are. If you say you don't have trauma, I don't think you're really living. Because
yes.
Everybody has some kind of trauma.
Yes, we do.
And it's just like, the women, when I go out to the jail and they say, oh, you don't know anything about this, or they'll let a curse word escape. I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I said, do you think I've never heard that before? I said, I might have said it before, and they said, really? But they got to know you're real, they got to know you're just like them. They look at you differently. I'm sorry, Joe. I'm sorry I didn't bust it in on your time. I apologize.
You didn't bust on my time. You have said some great things, Francis. I love y'all. I have enjoyed this, but I'm leading a Bible study next door, and I hear them gathering again. So it's been great. And maybe we can do this again sometime. I can be of help to you. All right?
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Joe.
Bye. Carol, do you possibly have the trauma healing book that has that arch in it?
Well, yeah.
Is it just kind of hard to see?
It makes it backwards, I think.
Oh, okay.
Is that?
Yeah, I can see it, but I can't read.
Well, if you could describe it for the people who are just able to listen to us right now.
Yeah. Okay. So the first part of it, so you're going kind of up this arc, is suffering, then being heard, grieving, lamenting, and then bringing it to the cross, forgiving, rebuilding, and resilience.
Yeah.
So that's kind of that progression. And when Joe was talking about, and when we learned this, ideally, if you can do them 5 days in a row with the folks that are incarcerated, it's best. But in our facility at Daviess County Detention Center, we just can't do that because there's so limited community space that, Celebrate Recovery and, just different other groups are meeting in those rooms. And so we can't do that. So we've done like a 3 and 2, either 3 and 2 or 2 and 3. I can't.
The first one we did was 3 and 2, but then we found out it works better 2 and 3. 2 and 3,
because, they deal with so much all at one time. So, and then, I'm going to talk a little bit about one of the things that we did on the outside, and then Joy might have something that she might be interested in doing that, because Francis and I have done 3 groups in Daviess County Detention Center, but we've also done some groups outside of the detention center. And when Joy needed some to be trained, to facilitate, because we can't go in the jail right now with this particular program. So we did it at Fresh Start for Women and had, we had to do it in over a 2-week period of time. And so what we physically did was they wrote things down on their Take It to the Cross, and we had like a little fire pit, and we went outside and burned their worst trauma. And one of the things in this group is if they don't share, if they don't want to share, sometimes you start with the smaller things. But in this particular one, we asked them, no one was going to see it. They ripped it up in the tiniest pieces that they could. We put it all in a paper bag, and we went out to a fire pit. And I was talking to one of the ladies that I saw the other night, because that particular thing, when we burned it, really spoke to her. And, she loved that we burned up the trauma. But the other thing was, it had just rained, and that wood and everything in there, it was just soaking wet.
Yep.
So we had a very few matches, and Joy and I are both trying to, light this stuff, and we weren't really sure if it was going to go. And I'm like going, okay, God, remember that story of Elijah, and, the fire came down from heaven. This has got to go, it's got to burn up. And it did. And when I saw her, she said, that was so cool to, to have that story, biblical story, kind of being played out, and what that release was for her. And Francis and I did that in the jail. We obviously couldn't have a fire, but I have a fire pit out in the back of my house, and so I took pictures of it, and then was able to take that back to the women and say, I told you I would burn it. This is the physical proof that I did that. So anyway, Joy, I don't know if you want to say something about the last ones that we did.
Yes, I'm just the baby of the group learning this thing, and to facilitate, which you're not really teaching. That's really true what Carol had said. You're supposed to present ideas and questions, and then they talk amongst themselves, sometimes in pairs, sometimes in groups. But the person who's sharing the questions, you're facilitating them going through this process. And it's so beautiful to see that. But some of the things I learned in just this one experience I've had, some of them said, when we put the things down that were our trauma and we burned them, I completely felt the heaviness just come off of me. They felt lighter. There were several of them that said that to me. Another one said, I felt free, like free from this for the first time. So these are just their ways of expressing it. It was beautiful to hear how they would say that. Mm-hmm. To me, that made an impact on me. And it's important to me. I'm a teacher in my job, but it's important to me when I think about healing of women and people, that I see that they are able to do that the way they respond is going to be different. And it's very important to me that we present in a way that they feel safe to do so, that they're sharing and interacting with someone else who has had some pain. It's just a safe place. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. It's a gift they give each other, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a beautiful part of that healing.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question for each of you to answer. Here's my question. Going into a jail setting, number one, that's going into a space that holds trauma, the energy that's left over from however many people and words and deeds. And then you're hearing stories of trauma from the women that you work with, right? Mm-hmm. So your body is absorbing that, your spirit is being in that energy space of trauma. How do you all manage that after you leave so that you all can keep healthy, so that you can come back another day to do this beautiful ministry and passion work that you do?
Well, the first thing the book tells you to, as facilitators, to come out together and talk afterwards. Are you okay? Do you have anything that bothered you tonight? So we're in a safe group already with us. Yeah. And so Carol was very good about that. When we were coming out of the jail, she'd always say, all right, are you all right tonight? Are you okay tonight? Do you have anything you need tonight? And because Carol's a healer. Mm-hmm. And, there's some things that would bother you. Mm-hmm. But then I go to the deep breathing and scripture and worship music. Mm-hmm. And, God gave me the passion for this So
Yeah.
he's going to give me the tools to deal with it.
Mhm.
It's not always easy
Mhm.
because I've seen so many women come in and out and in and out and in and out. And I get frustrated and I get aggravated and I get hurt for them. But as long as I stay in his word and as long I relax with worship music.
That's beautiful. Oh, I
Mhm.
love that.
Mhm. I love going into nature. I love to go for a good walk, to be refreshed. And whatever it is with each one of us that we get recharged and refreshed, we do. We need time for ourselves, self-care. In fact, Chaplain Joe Collins was the person who taught me my first. That was my group, was with him on Zoom. During pandemic, he was doing trainings and I happened to be on one of his trainings. And self-care is important, that we are watching over our own self. If we love to read good books, listen to music. Oh, I love music, Francis too, also worship music. And I'm not a dancer, but like I love to just dance to the music in the house, just pour my whole self into it. And I just feel so refreshed doing that. So I'm sure that, some people are not dancers or don't want to dance, but I'm no dancer. But I do it to express the joy in my spirit,
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, those are good. One of the techniques that I have that I've tried to do is another, like what they teach in the class, is actually to visualize a box. And I actually bought this adorable dollhouse that's a log cabin. And so that's my new place that I kind of go and, just imagine God being there with me and just trying to relax. But and trying to leave it there. And that was like one of the things that, you put it in the box and you lock it and you say, okay, I'm not going to deal with this right now because I've got to cook dinner, or, and this is what you tell the people in the class too. Mm-hmm. Just put it away, but you don't throw away the key. You just get one of those things out at a time and just deal with it, when you can, and then put it away and not let it consume you. And both of you ladies at New Beginnings, I mean, we'll have to get together afterwards because the ladies at Fresh Start just gave their testimonies at a church the other night. And I mean, all three of them talked about being beaten on a regular basis. And I mean, my husband has never hit me. One time he raised his voice at me. I mean, and so I've not experienced that. And I saw one of the girls today because she works at a local business, and I went by there and I said, listen, we've got to somehow help people, young girls, young women, and boys and men too. But I guess it started in an early age. And, you don't stay. If your boyfriend or girlfriend hits you, that is a bad sign, and how to teach them, don't get into these, because you can sure see how with the economics the way they are, and, where are you going to go? How am I going to take 3 kids out here? Where am I going to go? And it's that trauma to me is just so sad, and just seems like it would be preventable in staying in there. Not 100%, but I don't know. But so you ladies will have to meet later, and we'll have to figure out a way to educate people better.
It is a very difficult trauma, physical abuse. And here in town, Oasis, they're the ones, they're our like sister facility. And so they deal with the domestic violence aspect, but it is a very difficult trauma. And on average, and this is just average, it takes an individual about 7 times of leaving before they fully are able to leave. And even then, each time that an individual chooses to leave a violent partnership, the risk of death increases. The risk of death toward that person, toward children, toward pets, right? Because all of those power and control issues and those threats, those intimidations, many times people will stay because, just like you said, Carol, where am I going to go with 3 children? Or maybe it's just me, but I have 2 cats. Our shelter here does not take in pets. Well, I'm not going to leave my cat behind in a situation, or my cats, when this person has threatened to kill them. And these are my children, right? It becomes very multi-level, very complex and complicated. And it's a very difficult trauma, very, very difficult trauma to work through. And there's usually that thread and that continuum of generational trauma there as well, of growing up in a violent home, seeing violence. I want to go back for a second because you talked about this beautiful log cabin. I can't get this out of my head. I'm visualizing this dollhouse. There's a log cabin. It's beautiful. So squirrel, my brain, ADHD brain, squirrel. What you're talking about is what in my world I call a container. And it's actually a visualization meditation that we do in a specific therapy modality called EMDR. It stands for eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. And it is one of the most effective therapy modalities for individuals who've experienced trauma and who have PTSD. And we utilize, it's called bilateral stimulation. So it's tapping back and forth very slowly while we're visualizing this container that becomes strong enough to hold that which we need it to. And on the inside, it is comfortable enough so that, which could be a person, a place, a situation, we put into it will stay. And then we learn how to then take that memory in whatever capacity and put it in there. So that triggered my memory. I'm like, wow, like I knew like the little bit I'd studied about this program is very trauma informed, but listening to it, like that's part of EMDR. That is part of the adult chair type of therapy that Michelle Chalfant created, which is beautiful. It's also part of somatic therapies, which are body therapies. And here, I'm going to say the last 10 to 15 years, what the mental health community is slowly coming to terms with is that you cannot talk your way out of trauma. You can talk about your trauma till the cows come home, right? You can talk and intellectualize, but
it ain't going to get rid of it.
It doesn't. It has to be through the body, through those sensations, through the memories, through the feelings of facing it, working through it with a trusted person. And I'll tell people, it doesn't have to always be a therapist, right? I mean, yes, I love what I do. I love my job. But we are nationwide. We are 300,000 plus short on mental health providers for the small part of our population that seeks out services. So therefore, it is just all of us who are those everyday people, right, who are helping each other along. And just as everybody has said, we all experience trauma. You don't get out of this life without pain and suffering. And the problem, I think, is that no one is there to help us to manage those thoughts and feelings. And we call that co-regulation in my world. And that's because no one taught our parents how to do that, right? No one teaches us, how do we learn to feel our feelings? How do we learn to be okay with crying, to be okay with anger, shame, embarrassment, and guilt, and work those out of our body? And Joy, when you talked about how you love to dance and you love to listen to the music, and how you're just going to be free and move the body, dancing is one of those very real ways we work out trauma through our body. And you don't have to be on America's Top Dancer or whatever. You can just learn how to just flow. That's what I call it. And it's beautiful. And I think the work you ladies do, and you too, Pastor Herzog with the bid, I think it's beautiful.
Well, and that's one of the things too that we talk about in this class is, what does society, I think they call it culture, what does culture say that you're supposed to do with your emotions, and dealing with crying and those kinds of things. And, culture says, and you stuff it, you just, you pretend it's not there, you do those things. So, we talk about what culture says to do, and then what the Bible says to do, and which one's working for you. Stuffing it is not, and they'll come to that conclusion, and it hurts. It hurts to let it out. But then as people do, then they, like Joy had described, they feel that freedom. Well, you feel that freedom one time, and it's like, oh, okay. Then you can go back to your little container and get one of those,
one more
issues out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have to mention this. Carol, you brought up education and prevention. New Beginnings, we have an entire branch of our nonprofit that is dedicated to prevention and education. I have to represent Green Dot. I have to represent MySpace. We have educators in elementary through high school teaching about being active bystanders, what are healthy relationships, and preventing interpersonal violence, because we know trauma is hard to cope with and deal with once it's happened, but education is the number one way to prevent it from happening in the first place, and letting these kids know what are the warning signs of unhealthy relationships. Getting in there, preventing sexual abuse is easier than helping it. Again, right. That's why we have an entire branch dedicated to education and prevention programming. So. Yeah. Another great thing here at New Beginnings. But wow, this has been a great conversation today. We have learned so much from all of you guys. Do you have any final things that we haven't touched on? What is the most important thing that stands out that you haven't had a chance to say yet?
I think a lot of the women that we deal with, you can see when they overcome an obstacle, or you can see when they feel that freedom that Joy talked about, their countenance changes. And every time, you see them in a different setting, they're different women. And I every time I go to the jail and see women back there, they don't want to see me because they're ashamed. And I call them to the window and I tell them, I'm happy to see you. I know it's not where you want to be, but you're not laying in the street, and you're still alive to make change still. And as long as you have a breath, you can make a change. And and they seem to hold that head up a little bit, and I wish there's some of them I wish I could just stick a stick under them and hold them up all day long, but when you get to see them and know them, it makes a difference in your heart too. I keep saying I think I have about 59,000 children out there somewhere, but it makes a difference. It just makes a difference.
Absolutely. Oh, that's beautiful.
I did want to say something. I didn't get a chance to say this earlier, but it was the same thing that Jennifer was talking about, this going to social media and trying to find, she was thinking about one more group. It was an evening and I happened upon to read that Jemay had said something. And I thought to myself, do I want to comment on this? I don't know if I have time to be involved. But I thought, no. And this is why I'm bringing it up. Trauma healing is that powerful that I am willing, if it does take me some extra time, I have to share this. And even though I don't have the experience that a lot of others do have, and I was so glad Chaplain Joe Collins could be with us and that Francis and Carol are here sharing their experience. But this is my contribution that I feel this, I want people to know about it so that there's an opportunity for them to get that freedom and that healing. Yeah. And that's the most important part to me, is that I felt like I needed to say something, and I'm glad we connected.
Yeah. Thank you for taking the time to be here. Carol?
I can't really think of anything as far as our groups are, but I just wanted to thank the chaplain for being willing and open and, supportive of us doing all that. And it's a lot of work on his part, to try to figure out, a place for us to be. And, it's harder on the deputies because they have to go get the ladies and, trying to figure out who's going to be able to be in the class and, all of those kinds of things. So I just would really like to, to thank him and Jailer Art Maglinger too for, allowing our jail to have a good news jail and prison ministry, which allows, this to be a part of that. So,
yeah. And we get to minister to the staff too while we're there. We get to know them pretty well. So, yeah.
Joni,
they would probably need a class.
I was going to say, Joni used to do our PREA training, the Prison Rape Elimination Act. Mm-hmm. And I said, you're dealing with highly traumatized people who are guarding highly traumatized people.
Right.
And when you have that, it is.
Yeah.
Like this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pastor Herzog, do you have any final words you would like to add?
Well, I was thinking about Jesus. He was noted to be a friend of sinners, it says, but I really think people really like to hang around Jesus for a number of reasons. He was friendly. He was not condemning. And you don't read a lot in scripture that Jesus listened, but I believe he is one of the best listeners he probably was the best listener there ever was. And that's one thing I like about these three women, and I'm sure about the two of you that I have not got to know as well as I'd like to yet. Friendly and good listeners. And that really goes a long way to build bridges into people's lives that they can come to the place where they want to share their own life with you. Way to go. Way to go.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. So we do something a little fun at the end of our podcast.
Carol's like, oh gosh, what are they going to
do? Here comes a break dance.
Joy has to show her dance moves.
Get it, Joy. Get it, Joy. Get it. I love it. Shelby and I came up with several questions. We call them rapid fire, but that doesn't mean you have to answer like within a split second. Oh, is that the container? Oh, Carol, that's beautiful.
Isn't that cute?
Oh, I love it.
Yes.
And you can like physically put things in there that are written.
No, I know. The door's open.
Oh, hi. Okay. Where did you get that?
I bought it at a consignment store, and I said I was buying it for my grandkids, but then when I brought it home, I said, I always wanted a dollhouse, so I think it's really for me. And I have just used it that way. So, and you just encouraged me to just keep doing it. So what is this silly thing we do now?
Squirrel brain, ADHD. We're doing rapid fire questions. But now that doesn't mean you have to answer it within like a second, But we're going to ask a series of questions, and each of you get to answer. And this is the fun stuff because, we talked about some hard stuff, right? And some sad stuff. And so in our nervous system, we're going to walk back up our ladder to our ventral where we feel safe and connected and where we can laugh and have fun. So we're going to ask these questions of you. Let's see. Shelby, would you like to go first with the first question, or would you like me to go first?
I would like you to go first, Jennifer. You take that first question.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, what is your favorite cereal?
Sugar Smacks.
Oh, yeah.
Granola Oats.
I forget the name of that.
I guess
Chaplain likes oatmeal crisp.
Oatmeal crisp.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of an oatmeal person as well.
Okay. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Healing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one.
Flying.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
It's funny because I have 3 grandsons that are named after superheroes. So I guess it would be rescuing, just being able to rescue, save people.
What would you?
I think mine would be change people, starting with myself.
Okay.
I love that. All right. What is your favorite gadget that you own?
Well, I am working a rubber band here pretty good.
Yeah. You got a fidget.
That nobody has seen until now.
I just bought a new gadget that I think I'm going to love. I want to put up apples to freeze for the winter, and it cores the whole thing.
Oh,
Just put an apple on it, and it peels it, and then you can slice them and freeze them. I love to make fried apples and apple pies, and there you go.
lovely.
Sounds delicious.
I'm not much of a gadget person.
That's okay.
Yeah, I don't know of any gadget that I have that I'd like to get rid of a gadget. The phone. But
That's usually the most popular gadget.
yeah, I know.
I should go get my flashlight and put it on my head.
You can tell them that.
Oh.
Carol, what's yours? Favorite gadget?
I can't really think of. The only thing that came to my mind, which is my garlic press. That's just so silly, but that is, it's a very functional gadget.
There you go. There you
Listen.
go. Garlic press.
It's whatever you like. Yes.
Exactly. Okay. Favorite band or musician?
Oh, God.
Favorite band or musician?
Favorite band or musician? Ooh.
I like the Bethel music. I don't even know which of the the Christian artists. They really are. But almost anything that the Bethel musicians put out, they're like, I can be in a bad mood, and man, they can get me turned around in a hurry.
I think they're involved with Maverick City, which is out of Redding, California. I can go on YouTube and listen to a bunch of those, Gyra, and those are some really great ones. But like secular bands, I was trying to think. You love a lot of. He has some good ones in mind that they're just great songs, but I just can't think of them right off the top of.
Well, it's not real spiritual. I like the Beatles.
The Beatles, I am classic.
I always liked Motown music.
Okay.
The Four Tops, Four Seasons, and Temptations.
Oh yeah, those are some goodies.
Marnell Harris is an excellent vocalist, and he was from Western Kentucky.
Yeah.
What is your favorite board game?
I like Scrabble.
Carol's like, no way.
No,
Carol can't sit still long enough to play a board game.
I don't know how to spell very well.
Yahtzee is fun.
Okay. My kids and I, we've played, Rummy Cube. Oh yeah, Rummy Cube.
Yes. Love that.
Oh, don't tell Joy I don't like board games.
That's okay. You don't have to be a fan. Okay. Favorite ice cream. What's your ice cream flavor?
Oh, chocolate mint.
Butter pecan.
Breyer's chocolate.
Breyers, yes.
All good choices.
There's one with salted caramel, something salted caramel or chocolate.
Yeah, that's a good one too. What is the most important thing that you own?
Wow.
Probably my car, because I don't like to stay
That's
at
her
home
office. Her car is her office.
Nice.
My rolling trash can is my husband.
Yeah.
Most important thing.
I guess probably the most important thing I own is probably my phone, and I hate it more than anything. But I keep my brain on there, everywhere I'm supposed to be and what time I'm supposed to be there, and notes and everything else. So I guess that's the most important thing and I do own it. It is paid for. Thankfully. I'm not a upgrade person. So I've still got iPhone 7S. So
That's okay.
It works.
It works. That's all that matters.
Yeah. My answer, this is what popped in my mind, is my Bible. I was amazed I thought of that first, because there's many things we own that are valuable and good, but I guess I can't imagine my life without it. Must be why that popped in my mind. And it's great to own your own home too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Okay, so you went first, Jennifer, which means I go last, right? So this is the last question.
I have the last question too.
Okay, well, this is my last question. So if you could be any animal, what would it be? What is your animal?
I'd be a horse. They're my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Fun.
I'd be a puppy dog.
Yeah, I was going to say dog too.
Well, do you have a specific breed? There's so many different dogs. There's big dogs. There's small dogs. What kind of dog? Labrador. Good choice.
And they're so friendly. They're so friendly. We own several Yorkies. We don't own one now, but Yorkshire Terriers.
Mm-hmm.
They are a fun dog. They're a really fun little dog.
They can catch mice.
Oh, wow.
That is an important skill if you're in the country, especially.
They just take them by the neck and shake them and kill them.
Wow.
That's important.
Okay, so what animal would you be then? Not a mouse.
Probably a Yorkie dog.
Yeah.
A Yorkie
Oh,
too.
you can't copy me.
I just love killing mice.
Oh,
Really?
I'm finding out lots of things about our chaplain that I didn't know.
see, this is why you say yes to strangers on a podcast called Start by Listening. You just never know. You never know.
Yeah, well, we'd like to know these things about you too. You should have chimed in on it.
Well, I'll tell you what, you all start a podcast and then Shelby and I will come on and be guests. The last question, the last rapid fire question is, what is your go-to coffee order here in Owensboro? And if you don't drink coffee, your go-to soda. What's your favorite?
Caramel macchiato latte.
Anything that's got like just the creamer in it, and I think I can get a better thing at a convenience store because I can just pump.
Makes sense. You're on the go. Yeah, it makes sense. You're on the go a lot. Yes.
So I sometimes I go to Starbucks, but I've got the Seattle's Best dark roast. And then I don't do dairy, so I do almond milk in that, and then a little stevia. But I do enjoy coffee.
I do too.
I've never drank a cup of coffee in my life, but I like tea and lemonade mix. Arnold Palmer, they say.
Yeah.
That's his favorite.
Lovely. Oh. Well, we have enjoyed spending this time with you all. It has been very enlightening, very informative. And I cannot say thank you enough for your time, because that is a service to us through this. And it's just beautiful. And just thank you. Shelby, do you have any final words?
No, thank you guys so much for being here. I learned a lot this episode. We can't thank you enough for, again, taking the time out of your busy schedules. You're helpful. Everything that you do to help serve the community. Thank you for spreading knowledge and awareness through this podcast as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies,
Thank
for
you.
your work.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Shelby, for
And-
opportunity.
Yeah. And to all of our listeners out there, we just want to say thank you for tuning in. And you can change the world tomorrow just by listening today. And I hope you all out there in podcast land have a beautiful experience just like we did.
Well, we've made it to the end of our episode. We want to thank you for listening. We hope you'll take something you heard today and use it to change the world tomorrow. We wanted to thank our music producer, Seth Hedges, from Uriah Wild Media. His website is in the show description. Also, a big shout out to Rodney Newton, our technical advisor.
See you next time. This project was supported by grant number VOCA 2020 Green River 26, awarded through the Kentucky Justice and Public Safety Cabinet by the U.S. Department of Justice. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this program are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Kentucky Justice and Public Safety Cabinet or the U.S. Department of Justice. Thank you.